Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another high-energy TOEFL reading session. Today, we are diving into a fascinating academic passage about the printing press. This is a classic TOEFL topic, how technology changes history. We will break down the text sentence by sentence to understand the main ideas and details, ensuring you can tackle questions like main idea and vocabulary with absolute confidence. Let's get started. If you find these lessons helpful, make sure to subscribe to My TOEFL and hit the notification bell. Join our growing community of achievers and take your exam preparation to the next level. Printing Press and Knowledge Transformation. The title, Printing Press and Knowledge Transformation, gives us a clear map of the passage. The phrase, printing press, tells us the specific technology we are discussing, the machine used to create books. The phrase, knowledge transformation, signals that the text will explain how this invention completely changed the way people learn and share information. This prepares us to look for cause and effect relationships between the machine and society. The invention of the movable-type printing press in 15th century Europe transformed the production and distribution of written knowledge by replacing slow manuscript copying with faster mechanical reproduction that reached broader segments of society. This first sentence sets the stage. I want you to focus on the phrase, transformed the production. This tells us that the way books were made changed completely. It happened by replacing slow manuscript copying with faster mechanical reproduction. This contrast between slow and faster is the key takeaway here. Historians examining literacy records argue that cheaper books encouraged the growth of universities, religious debate, and standardized education systems that gradually reshaped intellectual life across multiple regions. Here, the author gives us specific evidence. Notice the mention of literacy records. These records show that books became cheaper, which led to the growth of universities and standardized education systems. This explains the positive social impact of the invention. Comparative economic studies reveal that cities with early printing centers experienced faster growth in publishing industries and knowledge exchange networks, suggesting that technological innovation significantly altered communication patterns. Now we look at the economic side. The text mentions comparative economic studies. These studies show that cities with printers saw a boom in publishing industries. This growth proved that the new technology altered communication patterns, meaning people shared ideas differently than before. Beyond economic change, printed materials challenged traditional authorities by allowing scholars and citizens to access diverse viewpoints without relying solely on official institutions or oral transmission. This sentence introduces a shift in power. The phrase, challenge traditional authorities, is crucial. It happened because people could now access diverse viewpoints without depending on official institutions. This means the church or government lost some control over what people knew. Pamphlets and translated texts circulated scientific theories and philosophical arguments, creating a new paradigm in which information spread rapidly and intellectual communities extended beyond local borders. Here we see the types of materials, pamphlets, and translated texts. These helped create a new paradigm, which is a fancy word for a new model or way of doing things. In this new world, intellectual communities extended far beyond just one town or city. Researchers analyzing correspondence networks note that writers increasingly reference printed works, which helped standardize terminology and foster collaboration among geographically distant thinkers. This sentence confirms the connection between thinkers. Researchers looked at correspondence networks, or letters between people. They found that print helped to standardize terminology and foster collaboration. Scientists could finally work together easily. However, the spread of print also raised concerns about misinformation and social instability, as controversial ideas circulated without centralized control. The word, however, signals a problem. The text mentions concerns about misinformation and social instability. This happened because ideas spread without centralized control. Just like today, fake news was a worry. Governments attempted censorship policies, yet historical comparisons indicate that strict regulation often increased public curiosity and underground distribution rather than suppressing debate. How did leaders react? They tried censorship policies. But did it work? No. The text says strict rules often increased public curiosity and led to underground distribution. Banning books made people want them more. Modern scholars evaluate printing history to understand how technological advances influence social trust, political authority, and the long-term evolution of public discourse. Finally, the passage connects to the present. Scholars study this history to see how technological advances impact political authority and public discourse. It is a lesson for our digital age, too. Now that we have a solid understanding of the text, let's tackle the first question. What is the main idea of the passage? This question asks for the main idea. We need to find the option that covers the entire passage, not just one detail. Paragraph 1 discusses the invention and economic growth. Paragraph 2 discusses the intellectual and social changes. Paragraph 3 discusses the negative challenges like censorship. We need an answer that combines the printing press, knowledge, and the societal results. Let's take a closer look at option A. The printing press primarily strengthened government control over information. This option claims the press strengthened government control. However, paragraph 3 explicitly says that strict regulation failed and often increased public curiosity. The text suggests government control weakened, not strengthened. Incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option B. Economic growth in European cities depended only on religious reform. The text mentions religious debate, but it also mentions universities and publishing industries. Also, the word only makes this statement too extreme. Economic growth depended on the publishing industries and knowledge exchange, not just religion. Incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option C. The printing press changed knowledge production and had complex social consequences. This option is very comprehensive. It mentions that the press changed knowledge production, which matches paragraph 1, transformed the production. It also mentions complex social consequences, which covers the intellectual growth in paragraph 2 and the censorship issues in paragraph 3. Correct. Now, let's take a closer look at option D. Manuscript culture remained more influential than printed materials. The text states that the printing press replaced slow manuscript copying and reached broader segments of society. This implies that print became more influential, not less. This option contradicts the very first sentence. Incorrect. The correct answer is C, because the key expressions in the text directly match this option, while the other choices either provide incomplete information or clearly contradict the passage. Moving on to the vocabulary question. The word paradigm in paragraph 2 is closest in meaning to. This question asks for the meaning of the word paradigm. Let's look at the context in paragraph 2, creating a new paradigm in which information spread rapidly. The text describes a shift from an old way, oral, official, to a new way, rapid spread, diverse views. We are looking for a word that means a model or a system. Let's take a closer look at option A, a fundamental model or framework. This option, a fundamental model or framework, fits perfectly. A paradigm shift is a change in the fundamental model of how things work. Correct. Now, let's take a closer look at option B, a small printing device. The sentence says the pamphlets created a paradigm. A pamphlet cannot create a small printing device. This does not make sense in the context. Incorrect. Now let's take a closer look at option C, a traditional religious belief. While the text mentions religious debate, the word paradigm refers to the structure of information spread, not a specific religious belief. Incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option D, a political censorship law. Censorship is discussed in paragraph 3, but here in paragraph 2, the context is about the spread of information, not the restriction of it. A paradigm is not a law. Incorrect. The correct answer is A, because the key expressions in the text directly match this option, while the other choices either provide incomplete information or clearly contradict the passage. Let's look at the third question. Why does the author mention literacy records and economic studies in paragraph 1? This is a purpose question. We need to know why the author included literacy records and economic studies. In the text, these records show that cheaper books encouraged the growth of universities, and that printing centers saw faster growth. The author uses these sources to prove a point about the impact of printing. Let's take a closer look at option A, to show that manuscript copying remained common in rural regions. The text actually says printing replaced manuscript copying. It does not use these records to show that manuscripts remained common. Incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option B, to criticize the cost of early printed books. The text mentions cheaper books. The author is highlighting that books became more affordable, not criticizing the cost of them. Incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option C, to provide evidence that printing influenced education and urban development. The text links literacy records to the growth of universities, education, and economic studies to cities with early printing centers, urban development. This option accurately describes the author's purpose. Correct. Now, let's take a closer look at option D, to argue that literacy declined after printing became widespread. The text implies the opposite. It says books reached broader segments of society and reshaped intellectual life. There is no evidence that literacy declined. Incorrect. The correct answer is C, because the key expressions in the text directly match this option, while the other choices either provide incomplete information or clearly contradict the passage. Next up is the fourth question. All of the following are mentioned as effects of printed materials, except. This is a negative factual information question, signaled by the word except. We need to find the one option that is not mentioned in the text as an effect of printing. 3 of these will be in the text, and 1 will not. Let's take a closer look at option A, expansion of intellectual communities. Paragraph 2 explicitly says, intellectual communities extended beyond local borders. This is mentioned. Incorrect. Now let's take a closer look at option B, increased reliance on oral traditions. Paragraph 2 states that scholars accessed views without relying solely on oral transmission. This means reliance on oral traditions decreased, not increased. Therefore, this is the exception. Correct. Now let's take a closer look at option C, standardization of terminology. Paragraph 2 mentions that referencing printed works helped standardize terminology. This is mentioned. Incorrect. Now let's take a closer look at option D, spread of diverse scientific ideas. Paragraph 2 states that texts circulated scientific theories. This is mentioned. Incorrect. The correct answer is B, because the key expressions in the text directly match this option, while the other choices either provide incomplete information or clearly contradict the passage. Finally, let's solve the last question. What is the relationship between paragraphs 2 and 3? This question asks about the relationship between paragraph 2 and paragraph 3. Paragraph 2 is very positive. It talks about diverse viewpoints, scientific theories, and collaboration. Paragraph 3 starts with however and introduces concerns, misinformation, and censorship. So, we are looking for an answer that reflects this shift from positive expansion to negative challenges. Let's take a closer look at option A. Paragraph 3 repeats only the economic evidence described earlier. Paragraph 3 does not discuss economic evidence. That was in paragraph 1. Paragraph 3 focuses on social instability and censorship. Incorrect. Now let's take a closer look at option B. Paragraph 3 introduces unrelated political events from a later period. The events in paragraph 3 are not unrelated. They are a direct result of the spread of print mentioned in the previous paragraphs. They are reactions to the printing press, not random events. Incorrect. Now, let's take a closer look at option C. Paragraph 3 focuses on technological design details ignored previously. Paragraph 3 does not talk about the mechanics or design details of the press. It talks about the social and political reaction to it. Incorrect. Now let's take a closer look at option D. Paragraph 3 discusses challenges and reactions to the information expansion explained in paragraph 2. This is perfect. Paragraph 2 explains the information expansion, diverse views, rapid spread. Paragraph 3 discusses the challenges, misinformation, and reactions, censorship, to that exact expansion. Correct. The correct answer is D, because the key expressions in the text directly match this option, while the other choices either provide incomplete information or clearly contradict the passage.